Hey folks, it's Ben here. Before this episode begins, I want to let you know that one of the themes discussed is suicidal ideation. If you or someone you know struggles with suicidal ideation, please call or text 988 to connect with a trained crisis counselor 24/7. You can also chat online at 988lifeline.org.
We all have a responsibility to deal with this crisis. We can't continue to abide having tens of thousands of fellow human beings living out of doors.
I lost my hope. I lost my belongings. I also lost my children.
Everyone is so impacted by homelessness, whether you're living unsheltered or whether your heart is breaking as you pass by a tent every day, walking your kids to school.
So who pays for it is all of us as a community. Whether we're putting in our dollars or we're putting in our votes or we're putting our support, I equally believe that the community owns our solutions out of homelessness.
And I was running to whoever would accept me. I was running to whoever would let me live there and to where the drugs were.
The good news is it's not a mystery. We've had so much trial and error, so many success stories that we know what works.
We need a more accountable system. The decisions, the policy programs that have been put in place have not gotten the job done. That is in part, I think, because we need to hold government accountable. We, as voters, need to insist on results.
On the eve of the 2024 election, as Angelenos face a decision on Measure A and the future of local funding for homeless services, we sit down with leaders of advocacy groups, homeless service providers, and system administrators to discuss the critical role community plays in ending homelessness. As we face a moment of political fracture and partisanship, this episode pauses with a community that has transcended differences and committed their lives to bringing their neighbors home. Join us as we speak with those ending homelessness, because there's no issue that's closer to home.
My name is John Masseri.
My name is Veronica Lewis.
My name is Dr. Valicia Adams-Kellum.
My name is Jerry Jones.
My name is Stephanie Klasky-Gamer.
I'm Ricky Dillard. Welcome to Homeland.
Well, hello, Los Angeles. We're rolling? Awesome. Alrighty.
My name is Ricky Dillard. I work for the Whole Child, and I'm a housing navigator for homeless families.
Can you tell us just a little bit about what a typical day or a typical week looks like for you, if there is such a thing as a typical
There's no
day
such
or
thing as typical.
I know there isn't. That's why I'm asking tongue in cheek a little bit here.
We get to work and there's so many fires you have to put out. You know, I'm a housing navigator, but I'm also a counselor. Mm-hmm. I'm also a housing locator. I'm also what feels like to be a landlord. You know, our clients, you know, because of their past trauma, a lot of them don't know, like, what to do in certain instances. You know, so we're there to help them. We're there to show them.
I want to talk a little bit about the role of community in your life. What are some of your memories of home growing up? What was that like for you?
Well, growing up, it was great. I was the daughter of an Air Force brat.
Did you move around a lot?
Yes, we moved to Europe 6 months after I was born.
Wow, where in Europe?
I lived in Germany, I lived in Holland, I've been to Spain, I've been to France. So I had a good life. You know, my younger years, I grew up with both parents until I was 17 years old. When we came back to the United States, my dad decided to take some time off, and we flew into New Hampshire and we drove from New Hampshire to LA. So that he can show us, you know, all the different states and let us experience it. It was 4 kids, a dog, and 2 parents in one car.
So Angelenos are going to the polls. They're going to be voting on a lot of different things, but one of the things they'll be voting on is Measure A. Can you talk to us a little bit about what Measure A is and how it got onto the ballot?
So I think it's important to note that Measure A will essentially replace Measure H.
This is Dr. Valicia Adams-Kellum, CEO of the Los Angeles Homeless Service Authority,
which was passed in 2017. And Measure H was really a game changer because it was a local fund that was made available to invest in homeless delivery services, to ensure that we had housing that was readily available to people by way of subsidies, what we call time-limited subsidies, increased outreach and supportive services, to really continue to support what we were already doing with making sure that people are getting the permanent supportive housing, but the supportive services in housing and what agencies needed to do to fill gaps really came by way of Measure H. So Measure A will do what Measure H did, but also invest in prevention and permanent housing development, which is so important on the front and back end of this terrible crisis.
So 2 things we know that voters want to see dealt with in this election in Los Angeles are homelessness, the rising numbers of folks who are living on the streets, and the rental housing crisis, the fact that there's not enough affordable housing and rents have been rising steadily.
This is Jerry Jones from the Greater LA Coalition on Homelessness.
Measure A tackles both of those issues. And from the standpoint of homelessness, the connection to housing is that we know that's one of the main drivers of why people are losing their housing and finding themselves homeless to begin with. So Measure A is intended to deal with the underlying root causes that is driving the numbers of people who are falling onto the streets. It is a citizen-led ballot measure. That's unusual.
Tell us about why that's unusual.
For the first time, it turns out, in Los Angeles County's history, this is a ballot measure for an LA County level policy change that was added by the voters through a signature campaign. In this instance, voters themselves have put this before the electorate to say, here is a set of changes to housing and homelessness policy that experts, practitioners, advocates have developed among ourselves that will work, that will be more effective than what we have now. So it's citizen-led in the best sense of that word.
You actually experienced a season of homelessness. Can you talk to us about what led to that? You're explaining this incredible, community and this home, and then you also experienced a season when it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about that?
I got pregnant the summer before my senior year.
Wow.
And my parents were already on the rocks. My dad, he left my mom, not us. He left my mom in 1990, the December before I graduated high school. And things got really rocky with my mom. She took a turn in life as far as she became unemployed and everything. We were living in North Pomona at the time. And, to be totally honest, my mom met a man that didn't want us there. He wanted to move into our home and he didn't want us there. So my mom actually kicked me and my sister out. I was a senior in high school right before I graduated. So I lived with my friend. I graduated. I went back to my mom's. And then she was like, no, she couldn't. It just got worse. So she put me out on the streets.
And this was right after high school?
Right after high school. I had my daughter. She was only 2 months old. So she dropped me off at my daughter's dad's house, and his parents were like, no. And I called my dad. My dad picked me up. My dad was like, I can't either. So he had just started a new relationship. So he dropped me and my sister off at the welfare office and was like, I can't do nothing for you guys.
What thoughts are going through your head? What emotions you're feeling? You have a 2-month-old baby. You've just finished high school. What are some of the things that you're feeling?
I knew it wasn't what I wanted after high school. I had plans. I had, goals and everything. I was very angry with my parents. I was very distraught. My sister and I went and lived with friends here and there. Between 1991 and I'm going to say maybe 1997, my daughter and I lived in 17 different places.
Wow. And
I'm honestly, to be totally honest, on half those places, I can't even tell you where they were at. I would just go wherever people would let me stay. I would just go, I would think about my childhood and how perfect my family was. And now here I'm in a life where I have a 2-month-old. I just graduated high school. And because my parents' marriage fell apart, the family fell apart. My whole life fell apart. I got very emotional. I got depressed. I contemplated lots of suicide. I contemplated giving my daughter up for adoption. I even went so far as even contacting an adoption agency because I knew that we had been living in a park in Cucamonga for about a week, my daughter and I. And I was just at my point where it was like, I needed to do something. So I thought about giving her up for adoption and then taking my own life.
So when you and your daughter were in that park, can you tell us what that experience was like for you guys?
I chose a park with the dugout because it had the covering on it. It was the dugout. We had a couple of blankets. You would have seen a very sad little girl. A very sad little girl. More of just holding my daughter, just sitting there on that wooden bench. Just holding her. And then when it was time to lay down, just because the bench would only be 2 slats of wood, and trying to keep her in my arms and not drop her. It was cold. And it was foggy a lot. So it's a picture of just distraught. That's what it was. It was a lot of distraught. And I pondered a lot at that time, like, about my life. What had it become?
My name is Veronica Lewis. I am the director of the Homeless Outreach Program Integrated Care System, better known as HOPEX. And I've been in the field for 23 years.
My name is John Masseri. I'm the CEO of the People Concern. I've been in this work for 25 years.
My name is Stephanie Klasky-Gamer. I'm the president and CEO of LA Family Housing. And I've been in this work for about 30 years.
It's incredible.
Yeah. I just went to go visit the first permanent supportive housing development I built about 29 years ago.
Where was that at?
In Atlanta, Georgia.
It's
So I was
incredible.
just there and I visited it. It looks great.
Still.
It still looks great. This entry table that I bought as a very young adult who never even bought herself furniture, but I was buying furniture in perpetuity for a building, was still the table there.
Did you always envision yourself going into this line of work, or was there a moment where you were doing something else and then the light bulb went on and you joined this? What was that kind of genesis for you?
No, I did not always envision doing this work. I was an art history major in undergrad at the University of Michigan. Go Blue.
The short version is I taught at an at-risk youth school right after college, and I'm born and raised in South LA, but I understood some of the dynamics in South LA, but that wasn't my life or immediate environment. So teaching these young people at age 21, and they're
Wow.
15, 16, 17, 18, 19 in some cases, I learned a lot more about just some of the challenges, some of the systemic issues that had led their families to be the way they were, that led these kids to be kicked out of the school districts, et cetera. And that opened my eyes, and I knew that I wanted to do something to address that. And then, one thing led to another, and I was an assistant director for less than a year, and then the director of HOPEX, and it's been 13 years. So it was meant to be, I like to say.
Part of my role as a leader, and I think collectively part of our role as leaders, is to be, consistent advocates. And sometimes that's difficult, because we have to take on and challenge, the funders that fund us, right? And the proverbial biting the hand that feeds you. But in some cases, that's necessary. We try to be polite and respectful in doing it. But, I think a big part of our role is speaking the truth. And that can be hard.
My senior year of college, though, I took some classes in the School of Architecture, and I learned this concept of the built environment and how critical the built environment was in connecting people, in creating the spaces where people connect to each other, connect to their community, connect to the city they live in. But while I was at UCLA in that graduate program, I met housers. And I realized that my interest in the built environment, my interest in public art, I was combining those two. My interest in public art was to ask the question, who creates art for whose benefit? And who pays for it and where it gets placed defines who gets to benefit from it.
Wow. I'm absolutely fascinated by those questions applied to housing.
It's the exact same questions today. Who pays for the housing?
Yeah.
Where it's located absolutely defines who gets to benefit from it.
Who pays for this, right? And then to whose benefit, right? Like tying those two things together with what you all do as an organization. Like what is the practicality of all that?
So who pays for it is all of us as a community. Whether we're putting in our dollars or we're putting in our votes or we're putting our support behind building housing, the community owns the housing that we build. And I think that's really critical because I equally believe that the community owns our solutions out of homelessness and poverty for so many people. And so the role that our community plays in ensuring that housing gets built in all of our neighborhoods, the role that the community plays is in ensuring that there are financial resources at the city, state, county, federal levels to support the production and the operation of affordable housing is critical.
So the community's paying for it. The community has that ownership. Ultimately, in your perspective, who's benefiting from it? Who's benefiting from the housing?
The community needs to benefit from it.
Yeah.
But by community, that's our folks and our neighbors experiencing homelessness. It's our housed neighbors. It's our elected officials. It's our business leaders. It's our faith leaders. It's my kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
We all own and benefit from what we build in our shared communities.
Yeah.
And I was just at my point where it was like, I needed to do something. So I thought about giving her up for adoption and then taking my own life. And that was just what I was going to do. But now, being a woman of God, I know that that time, that wasn't God's plan.
Yeah.
Because I ended up meeting my best friend. I ended up going to a job interview at the fair, the LA Fair. And I ended up meeting my best friend. My daughter was there one day with me. And she's like, your daughter's so cute. She's like, oh, I'll watch her anytime you want. And at that time, I was so far like, okay. So I took her to her that night. And I was like, you want to watch her? And she's like, yeah. And I said, okay. And
So you took her up on the offer right away?
A stranger. She was a stranger. I just barely met her that day.
Wow.
I took my daughter to her house, dropped her off, and I didn't go back for almost a week.
Wow.
Because I didn't have nowhere to live.
Yeah.
And I felt like she'd be safe there.
Yeah.
So when I went back a week later, her parents sat me down and they were like, you know what? We love this little girl. And they told me something inside of us, because they were church, a church family. She's like, something inside of us is telling us, we need you to live with us. You need us and we need you. So I lived with them for almost 3 years.
When you were experiencing this period of your life, in those moments, what was it that you needed in order to kind of exit a season of housing insecurity or homelessness? What were some of the things that you practically needed?
Practically, I needed resources like we have now. I didn't know of any back then. Nobody talked to me about those things. And not only was I homeless, but I fell into addiction. I fell into addiction and, for years. And that's why I had become homeless off and on throughout the years between 1991 until I finally had a stable home about 2016.
Wow.
So it was the resources. I didn't know resources. I didn't have, they weren't available. Well, I mean, I'm not going to say they weren't available because they probably were.
Not
they
at the
just
level
weren't.
they are now.
Yes, exactly. They weren't known. They weren't given. Even when I went through reunification with my daughter back in 2012, they weren't at the level they are now because I wasn't offered housing. I wasn't offered mental health. I wasn't offered, anything. I was just like, you did a parenting program, you did rehab, you did this, you completed, here's your daughter back. Okay.
Wow.
And I fell back right into homelessness.
This question is going to sound a little simplistic, but I want to ask it to you. When you lost stable housing, what were some of like the practical things that you lost access to? When someone's going through a season of homelessness and they lose that stability, what are they actually losing?
I lost my hope. I lost my belongings. I also lost my children. I had 2 sons after my daughter, and I lost both of them.
To the system, or?
I actually lost my daughter to the system during that because of the homelessness, and I ended up trying to commit suicide. I was in 3 different mental hospitals because of the fact that I had no stability. And I was running to whoever would accept me. I was running to whoever would let me live there and to where the drugs were. You know, so it was just a whole kind of just unraveling of things. So, like I said, I lost one of my sons to his dad, and I lost the other one, you know, mentally to his dad. You know, I actually gave up even trying to look for him. I didn't see him from the time he was 5 till he was 16 years old. Wow. Because I mentally checked out.
Yeah.
During the first few years, because you get to a point where you just don't think that you're just worth anything. You get to a point where you don't think you deserve anything, because everything that when you're a child, we have these dreams, we have these goals, we want to do like this future. And because mine failed, I felt like my whole life failed. I was homeless. When I would have my one son back, I would be in a shelter. I was in shelter in Whittier. So he would come with me on the weekends and we'd be in the shelter. You know, and I would try to make it fun for him. You know, I would try to make it, we were staying in different hotels, and even though we were in a different church every day, you know, but you lose your dignity. You know, I even lost my family for a while. They didn't talk to me for years because I felt like, because they weren't there for me, I felt they weren't there for me, even though they tried to help me, but it wasn't on my terms, it was on their terms. You know, they kind of just were like, okay, you know, we tried, we put our hand out, and now, you know, since you don't want to do it this way, we can't help you no more. And that was part of my addiction, though. And being homeless and addiction, it just felt like there was a season where it just felt like I was just free. I didn't have to deal with anybody. I didn't have to worry about anybody. And all the pain that I had felt from high school to then was Band-Aid with addiction. And so the homelessness was like, this is just where I belong. So I lost any thought of thinking that I ever even belonged anywhere.
You felt like you belonged on the streets.
Yes. And it was so easy for me to be on the streets than it was to be in a place. Because I'd met people or people would be like, come live with me. And it was so much easier. And I took it more that I didn't belong with anybody. I didn't deserve to be with anybody because I had failed at my life.
We're back at First Friday.
I want to ask kind of a few follow-ups here. So
You've heard from these folks throughout the series. Every First Friday, a group of people who work for homeless service providers and system administrators gather together. It's a space of authentic community.
So who does the responsibility for what is happening in Los Angeles County sit with? Like, if there are all of these different threads and problems and challenges, like, and I mean, we can use the phrase like, you know, multidisciplinary and this and that, but like, put that aside for a second. People who are listening to this don't know what that is. They don't care. Like, who does it actually, like, who does the buck stop with? Or is that the most simplistic question that there's no answer to because it's just not, it's a fallacy. It's a fantasy. There's no one solution here, but like, if there's a problem, how do we fix it?
The person that's responsible is me, the voter. The voter, because we decide who is in office and how they prioritize his resources. We decide where our policy with our vote. Being educated consumer, knowing how our marketplace works, how our economy works, how our political system works, being informed is the only way we are responsible for where the direction the country heads.
No. No, I disagree. As an elected official, I disagree.
Let's go.
No,
Let's hear it. Let's
I
hear it.
disagree. I disagree as an elected official, and this is why. And me and Miguel were kind of talking about this earlier, where like I'm somebody that truly believes that like we elected officials are for the most part chosen for us. I'm an elected official in a very small town of like 40,000 people. I think it's like 50,000, right? And it's really interesting because like only like 5,000 people voted, number one, you know, and the idea that we are putting, unless we make voting on weekends and we make it a holiday and we really promote voting and we really have a democracy that votes, we can't put it on the folks that are working 2-3 jobs that can't go out and vote, right? So we would have to fix, I think, a lot of things within voting before I think we can say it's on the voter. I actually believe it's a fallacy that there's no one buck stop. Homeless services is a multifaceted kind of catch-all for so many things that then the only way to solve it is by actually going after the next layer, and there'll be another layer after that.
Culturally speaking, are we a culture that gears towards lifting up those that are most in need, or are we a culture that's has an alternative perspective?
I think it's problematic. If we are identifying anybody who is responsible, then I think the implication is that, like, if there's people who are responsible, then there's people who are not. And I think that's the problem. Certainly there are those who have more power, more opportunity, more access to impact the issue, but I think there are things that everybody can do. Families can do donations. People can befriend the guy at the corner and make sure his basic needs are met. Like, voters can vote. Like, electeds can pivot resources. People can try and recruit to the sector. Landlords can, you know, like, everybody can do something. Otherwise, we will continue to make the problem somebody else's, make the person distant, make the problem distant, make the solution not on us.
I mean, I'll just say it, we're all responsible. We're all responsible. We can all do something. Just looking at someone, you know, treating them like a human being, you know, exchanging greetings, you know, instead of ignoring them. Like, those are things that can make a difference that don't cost you anything.
Everyone has a personal stake in this. We recognize we have to change hearts and minds in order to get people to have buy-in. Shift from the doing of volunteering to the being with someone. That's where true transformation happens. When you allow yourself to see the humanity in something that maybe you disagree with, and that's okay that you disagree, but you're not going to deny the humanity of the person sitting across from you.
Yeah.
What is the responsibility that we have as members of this community to our neighbors who are living unhoused?
Usually by the time folks are trying to access our system, they've exhausted every possible option.
Here's Veronica Lewis again.
And so even if somebody could let them sleep on their couch or on their floor for a few days, nobody is willing to put their own housing at risk and have somebody there long term that's not on a lease. Or if somebody's connected to some type of public assistance, they're not going to risk that and put that at risk. And so, or if they just don't have any more resources to have any more utility bills, given just the high cost of everything right now. Some people literally just can't even afford it. So unfortunately, that's the story. The bottom, when I say the bottom is falling out, that's what I meant as well. Not just you got put out, but like you've exhausted every resource, every favor. In some cases, burn bridges, whatever it is, you are tapped out and you have nothing else that can keep you off the street every night.
What would you say the role of community is in helping someone who has experienced homelessness and is now housed maintain housing? How important is community?
Well, I would say it's everything.
Here's John Masseri again.
You know, our housing retention rates are 92%, and they have been for the 25 years that I've been at the agency. And of that other 8%, about 5% of those folks actually pass away in their units. So we have a very small number of folks that, you know, surrender their units. And why is that? It is this sense of community. So, you know, I would say that getting people housed, of course, is critically important, but I would argue that keeping them housed is even more important.
Yeah.
And how do you do that? You do it by building a sense of community. I think community absolutely is critical. And the other thing I would say is that it is probably one of the most powerful tools we have to combat NIMBYism and a sense of, oh, it's those people living in that building.
Yeah.
It's like, no, these are our neighbors and we're all living here together and we're interacting, you know, together. So I think it's really critically important. And I think, you know, ultimately giving people a sense of purpose and belonging.
You know, I don't really like that metaphor of an onion, but I never think of another one that has so many layers that you peel back.
Here's Stephanie Klasky-Gamer again. President and CEO of LA Family Housing.
But I think at the core, I don't know, I like, what's the flowers that's always in my Mother's Day bouquet that I love?
Is it peonies?
Peonies.
My wife loves peonies.
I love peonies.
Yeah.
So let's use peonies instead
Perfect.
of a
I
flower.
love it.
Right?
Look like an onion, but they're way nicer.
I know, and they're beautiful, and they last a long time. They
do.
don't make you cry,
Yep.
and they come in lots of different colors.
Yep.
Peonies. Let's use peonies as my community. They come like a tight little bulb, and then they just keep opening up. And I think there is just something really magnificent that opens up with the community that surrounds our participants.
Yeah.
The first layer being their own community that they live with or did live with when they were still outdoors. The community of our staff that supports that layer. Our agency, broader than our staff, but as an agency, what do we do to support our own staff? But every property, which means every individual that's in housing for us, is also supported by the neighborhood we live in, supported by the volunteers that say, hey, I want to come and do bingo night, or can I lead a shop and swap, or can I, bring Thanksgiving dinner? Like the volunteers coming from all different corners of LA with their own unique life experiences and motivations, coming and spending time, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I always wish that our electeds could come more often to visit our properties without cameras, without cause, but just to get refueled, to remember why they're in this work. Someone asked me, they were walking around our property and they said, do you ever get lost? I said, by choice, yeah. I will go and wander because I just need to sit in a corner and watch like magic happen. When it happens between residents, between staff and residents, between two staff members, like our community doesn't feel enough wins. They don't get a window on all that gets created when people are on a journey out of homelessness. And I think that, I would say that's my job in many ways. It's my job to be sure the community feels the wins and they see a peonies opening up.
Yeah. How did you start working at the Whole Child? What led to that?
When I got clean, I've been clean since 2007 now. And when I got clean, thank you. And when I got clean, I applied for a job as a temporary receptionist. And I went to, it was a printing company. I was there for almost 16 years. I was there. And I ran into a friend and we talked and everything. We hadn't seen each other in years. And she called me one week and she was like, how much do you make? And I told her, and she's like, do you like your job? And I'm like, I don't like to sit here and look at a computer all day during, computer, like working, selling and everything. I said, but it pays my bills. She's like, we have a position open. She's like, you want it? She goes, it's not as much as what you make now, but do you want it? And I was like, yeah, because I had always wanted to do that, but I always thought you needed a degree. I wanted to do that. And I was like, really? She's like, yeah, it's working with Tay Youth, we're housing, ICMS, this and that. I'm like, okay, I was working there like 2 weeks later.
Wow.
But when they said homeless families, I was like, just the word homeless. I said, I'm there.
I want to go back to Measure A. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that means for how Angelenos think about their role in addressing homelessness in the community? The fact that it was citizen-led, that it didn't come from an elected. What does that say about how Angelenos think about the job they have to do when it comes to addressing housing and homelessness?
We all have a responsibility to deal with this crisis. We can't continue to abide having tens of thousands of fellow human beings living out of doors.
Here's Jerry Jones again.
And it says something about a society that would witness this humanitarian crisis for as long as we have. So the role of voters in tackling this issue now in November is to recognize we live in a democracy, that we're called on to do more than just, push some buttons at the ballot box or pay our taxes. We're called to roll up our sleeves and get involved. And that we have a responsibility to deal with these problems in our communities and the solutions to those problems. And the more distant we become from that obligation, the less power we have as people and the less legitimacy our society has as a whole. This is our opportunity to finally take some strides toward real solutions, not just politicking, but some actual solutions to the homelessness crisis and the rising rents.
Everyone is so impacted by homelessness, whether you're living unsheltered or whether your heart is breaking as you pass by a tent every day walking your kids to school. So we need a consistent revenue stream, a local revenue stream, to fill the gaps and continue to help us do what's working. This is the first time we've seen a reduction in the homeless count, and we need to keep going and we must scale. But we must build more affordable housing, and this particular measure will take us in that direction.
I want to ask you a question about Angelenos who might have hesitancy or questions. Maybe they've looked at the news, they've heard about money that's been spent before, they're looking at Measure A, and they've got questions about going to the polls and voting for Measure A. What are some things that you would say to those Angelenos?
I think we just have to recognize that we need a more accountable system. The decisions, the policy programs that have been put in place have not gotten the job done. That is in part, I think, because we need to hold government accountable. We, as voters, need to insist on results. And so this is a citizen-led ballot that is a bold new approach, is taking a different direction that's going to work. It's going to take some time. This is a crisis that's been building for decades. It's going to take some time to see real progress, but unless we do it differently, we're going to continue to have the crisis we have on our hands now.
So the family that took you in that night when your daughter was 2 months old, are you still in contact with them?
Yes. She's become my best friend. She lives out of state in Michigan now, but she's my best friend. And her mom and dad became an aunt and uncle to my daughter. And my kids know them. My family know them. I still talk to them. We text, social media. We've hung out for like holidays and stuff.
Did they ever tell you why they made that decision to support you in that way?
I call him Uncle Joe. He passed away a few years back, but he would always tell me, "Mijita, God told me to bring you and my Vanessa in." He goes, so that we can help you. And my daughter, to this day, she still talks to them too. That was her Uncle Joe and Auntie Carol. And they did wonders for both of us, when they took us in. And yeah, he just always told me it was God that told him, and I was like, a stranger. I was like, Uncle Joe, a stranger. He's like, yeah. And I wasn't the best stranger at that time. I was starting my addiction and everything, but they did. They took us in.
So what kind of relationship do you have with your daughter now?
We have a great relationship. We talk almost every day. She's got 2 kids now. And she loves it. All my kids love what I do. My daughter has seen the transition from through all of that, the addiction, the homelessness. She herself, became kind of a troubled teen when I lost her to the system. I lost her for like 2 years. And when she came back with me, she wasn't a nice person. She was bad in school and everything. But when she came back to me and I told myself, okay, look, I'm going to be clean. We're going to get our lives together. And we did. And I pushed her and she did it. And she ended up graduating on time. She ended up going to college. And she'll look at me sometimes and, she's even told me that she's proud of me. We practically grew up together.
Wow.
She went to my high school graduation. She always tells me I had 2 graduations, Mom. But we're very close. And I'm very close with my son. And, he went through some things with me too. But yeah, they're very proud of me. They love me. We have a great relationship.
Wow.
We just celebrated, my son that passed away would have been 27, the day before yesterday.
Oh, wow.
And we all went to dinner and celebrated his birthday with his kids. And we all went as one big family. All my kids and grandkids, my husband. To see that now, I'm just in awe. Because I've often asked myself, how did I get here? From the time I was 17 when I had my daughter to the first time I became homeless, through the addiction, everything. And I see myself now, and when I'll look at the picture with my family and I'm just like, wow. Like, this is what I have now. Imagine if I would have never gotten that addiction. Imagine if I would have just stayed homeless and just been comfortable in that life. I would not have what I have today.
We've talked a lot about, I'll just call it the problems. I'm not going to call it the crisis. It's just the problems. So we talk a lot about the problems. I do want to talk for just a second about you all and the people that you represent and the organizations you represent. If I think about the scale of the problem, the only thing that gives me hope is thinking about the people who are showing up and doing whatever they can to like be part of some type of solution. Why are you doing this? What has kept you here? What keeps you here?
I got in this line of work because my mission is to protect those who can't protect themselves. And it breaks my heart to see how people can treat other people like objects to be thrown away.
I think like many of us in the room, I'm a wounded healer. And we know, and I'll throw a stat, 70 to 80% of people who work in helping services have a history of trauma. And without the work, I don't know where I would be.
I'll say a lot of it was social justice, wanting to make a difference, wanting to get into it. I will say right now, it is knowing that I'm not alone and that there are other people that are just as driven, and thank God I can hold on to them. Knowing that such a big problem is not something that just falls on individual shoulders, has really kept me going. I've thought about bartending, but besides that, it's the folks that we work with and folks around me that keep me in it and consistently light that fire day after day, year after year.
I worked in the private sector before joining the nonprofit world, and I'm gonna be very frank. Some folks know this, not everyone, but I was suicidal when I worked in the private sector, and it was because I had to push for money and try to get people into debt and things like that, and it made me sick. I wake up every day, I don't care if it's Monday, Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, I don't care what day it is, because I enjoy going to work because of the community that's in this. Whether or not we're in the same agency still, whether or not we get to work on the same project still, I know that Jonathan Cheese down in South LA doing amazing work, and it's somebody that I've known for a very long time. I know Marina's still holding it down at Lhasa, the OG.
Yes.
Ben, you're down there. So it's like, I truly would not leave this because it's my home. It's my home. It's where I feel at home, and it's what makes me happy, being able to give back to my community in that way, and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thank you.
I want to turn reflective if I can. John, you've been in this work a long time. It's hard work. There's things and there's tension that you've had to navigate most people will never experience. So what are the things that have encouraged you? What keeps you here?
I think for me, the baseline is people. I think at the end of the day, it's the people that I've had the privilege of working with, the staff, amazing staff, not just in my organization, but across the sector, who are really passionate about the work and really care very deep. It's a visceral passion. You can't stay in this work if you don't feel it. In my own organization, about 20% of our current staff are people with lived experience on all different levels. And I've seen the changes in their lives. They've done the work. I always say we're not in the business of changing, fixing, or rescuing people. People change, fix, and rescue themselves. But our job is to provide the support and the tools and the resources and encouragement to help them make informed choices about their lives. And I've seen that happen, that magic happen over and over again so many times. Think about people that I've hired in our organization who are in key leadership roles now. Again, people with lived experience. So that's what drives me, is because I know what's possible.
In light of the challenges we still face as a community, where are the lights at the end of the tunnels for you? Where do you find optimism still in this work?
The good news is it's not a mystery. We've had so much trial and error, so many success stories, some challenges, right, that we know what works. And so we just have to come into alignment as a region, all of our, and philosophically, we don't necessarily have to agree, but come into alignment and be moving in the same direction. But I'm hopeful because we know how to do it. We've done it multiple times. We've done it well. We have sustained outcomes in terms of people not returning to the street, right? And all the other things related to health, well-being, emotional health, physical health, mental health, you name it. And so we just need to keep beating that drum.
You've been in this industry for a really long time, and what's happening with this podcast, it's evolving into being about those who have showed up and they've been involved in a long time.
Yeah.
Is there something for those who have been showing up for a long time that you would want them to know, that you would want to tell them?
What is the positive trigger for you? One that stands out for me, that when I have moments of quiet, I might be just driving home, I might be going to sleep at night, but I come back to this and it just, in that quiet, makes me smile. And it's when Rocky, one of our participants, moved into her own apartment. And she moved in and she just kept turning the lock, unlock, lock, unlock, lock, unlock, like a deadbolt. And both the twisting of it, but the sound it makes, locked, unlocked, locked, unlocked. That was a sign for her that she was safe, that she was where she was supposed to be, that she made it through this journey. But I also think it was equally a hug for her. She felt supported. And that's the sound that I hold. Sorry. So I keep a quote on top of my computer. It comes from Pirkei Avot, which is the ethics. And it says, "You're not obligated to complete the task, but neither can you ignore it." It's really hard when the task feels so daunting. But I know, like with every fiber of my being, that we know what we're doing is right. And we're on the right course. I didn't give up. And I won't give up. And I hope I inspire you not to give up.
You've inspired a lot of people not to give up. Having experienced that yourself, do you feel like that helps you to be a better case manager, to be a better, person to help someone who's currently going through that?
Oh, it gives me it gives me the drive, it gives me the heart. When I have my intakes with my clients and they're sitting across from me, I tell them, look, I'm not just another pencil pusher here to get your signature and help you get housed. I've been on your side of the table. And I tell them, if there's anything that you've been through, I've probably been through it myself. I just turned 50 last year. Thank you. Last year. I'm going to be 51 in 2 weeks. But it's funny because I threw my own party because I was so excited to become 50 because after everything I've been through, I shouldn't have even been 50. Wow. I should have never made it to be 50. So I tell my clients, I'm transparent with them. I do have my boundaries, but I'm transparent. I tell them, you name it, I've been through it. I've been through addiction. I've been through homelessness. I've been in 3 mental hospitals on 5150s. I've got kicked out of 7 rehabs before I finally graduated 1. I've been on the streets. I've lost my child to the system. I had a son that was in addiction. I lost him 5 years ago to a fentanyl overdose. So I tell my clients that this is me. So I want you to know you're sitting on that side of the table. One day you can sit on this side of the table. And I'm going to be here to help you get there.
When we began this project, our goal was to introduce you, our listeners, to the issues of homelessness. On the first day of production, after we finished our very first interview, we quickly realized the entire focus of the show needed to shift. Homeland isn't a podcast about homelessness. It's about introducing you to the incredible community of people who are ending homelessness. This community has committed their lives to the difficult work of bringing people home. But ensuring Los Angeles is a homeland for all Angelenos will take all of us. On our season's final episode, Homeward Bound, I'm joined by my co-creators Andrew Didway and Jared Beasley as we reflect on the past 3 years it's taken to create this project and look to the future of the homeless response system in LA. All that and more next time on Homeland. We want to invite you to join the Homeland by subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts. For more information on how to gain a deeper understanding of homelessness, visit ourhomeland.us for additional content, photos, and more resources on how you can join the work of bringing people home. Homeland was created by myself, Ben Kay, and Fulcrum Productions, in association with Astoria. The complete series is brought to you by United Way of Greater Los Angeles and distributed by PRX. This episode was written and produced by Ben Kay and Andrew Didway. Marketing, additional production, and photography by Jared Beasley and Joshua Jones. This episode was edited by Andrew Didway with additional editing by Sam Morgan. Our original music is by Jeffrey Emerson Geyser. Episode artwork by Philippe Martinez. Homeland's social media manager is Veronica Roy. Our podcast consulting crew is Marisol Bayo, Jerry Jones, Hazel Lopez, and Barbara Osborne. Members of the Homeland Advisory Committee for this episode are Dexter O'Connell, Reba Stevens, Taya Heisel, Tony St. James, Suzette Shaw, Allison Crosby, Amara Ananiwu, and Hazel Lopez. We would like to say thank you to all those who helped us along the way and ultimately brought this project to life. This episode of Homeland is dedicated to the 8,000 plus women and men who make up the Los Angeles homeless response system. Never get tired of doing the right thing. Never stop bringing people home. You are an inspiration. Thanks for listening, folks. Let's keep talking.